Welcome friends to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock flavoured podcast. Whilst we've been doing our thinking here in Derry and Tom's about those worlds of established IPs like the Alien franchise and Quatermass, and how well-read and published SF authors of the 60s and 70s were drawn into their orbit, such as Robert Sheckley writing Aliens and Deep Space Nine books, Michael Butterworth writing not only Hawkwind fiction, but also Space 1999 novels, along with E.C. Tubb, of course. And we've very briefly mentioned Alan Dean Foster with the Alien film adaptations and the original Star Wars spin-off Splinter of the Mind's Eye, although we haven't looked at his work in any depth. What for the future, perhaps? And indeed Mike himself we'll be looking at very, very shortly. But, as with the Alan Dean Foster books, those adaptations, as opposed to original stories set within the IP, were once a lifeline to folks of my vintage, i.e. the days before streaming, or Blu-ray, or DVD box sets, or licensed VHS releases, or even widely available TV repeats to record off the telly on your Betamax. The novelisation was a way into worlds that were previously only experienced in the most ephemeral of fashions. And that wasn't just the case for big cinema like William Cotswinkle's E.T., or Donald F. Glutt's The Empire Strikes Back, or Alan Dean Foster's The Thing. No. In the UK, we had our own homegrown brand of wobbly set and quarry-bound science fiction, like Doctor Who, for example, a property everybody knows about. The Doctor and Target books have had the odd mention on here over the years, and we'll be diving into all of that soon, thanks to Moorcock's intervention in that space. But for 4 glorious years, from 1978 to 1981, we also had one of the greatest accomplishments of British genre television, Blake 7. It's probably quite difficult to accurately define to a younger audience, or a non-British audience not generally steeped in this kind of telly, just how embedded in the national psyche certain elements of Blake 7 were, and to a large extent still are, even outside of more hardcore geek circles. It did, after all, get an average of 9 million viewers per week, meaning that almost 1 in 5 Britons watched it at its peak. It hit our telly in the immediate wake of seeing Star Wars at the Dorchester Cinema, broadcast on one of our 3 channels of television, one of which was only part-time, a prime-time sci-fi show that, unlike Doctor Who, consisted of hour-long episodes. Like Star Wars, it was about a rebellion of sorts, and like Star Trek, it had an Earth-centric galactic federation. But this wasn't Kirk's Federation. This was something quite different. This was Servalan's Federation. More on her later. Created by Terry Nation, a seasoned TV professional with a long history with genre TV, including Doctor Who and the Avengers, his greatest creation arguably being the Daleks, a villain that may be tired and overused by now, but still endure thanks to Raymond Cusick's iconic design. Personally, I think it was his development of the Department S character Jason King, a dilettante dandy and author who was basically Jerry Cornelius if written by a TV hack. As it happens, Nation will have been scripting those shows, created by another Who alumni and, incidentally, former Space 1999 writer Dennis Spooner, during the year following the release of the final programme in its novel form. Not suggesting anything, of course, just saying. Anyway, Blake 7. On the surface, it was a hard-edged space opera, an odd mashup of the Magnificent Seven, the Dirty Dozen, and the spaceships and ray guns popularised by Star Wars and on TV prior to that by Star Trek. But what elevated it was the under and overtones of the dingy, corruption-stained British TV dystopias of the 1970s that were fed by the state of the country at that time, the first season airing during the UK's winter of discontent, a time when I was more into trying not to fall off my rally striker and discovering old English flavour spangles than following politics. But I still remember the news showing images of rubbish piling up in the streets due to striking bin men, and Hull, like the rest of the north of England, being under the long shadow of the Yorkshire Ripper. Watching it back now, I'm struck by how much its colour palette reflects my memories of youth. Very few primary colours, lots of earthy tones, men with big hair, attractive women with even bigger hair, and lots of conversations about how shit the government was. But, much like TV in those days, if I spent a bit too long down the park, or went to Nana and Pops's for tea, episode missed, And that was that for years, or even decades, unless you were lucky enough to catch a repeat several years later during a TV strike or something when they were short of new content. Fortunately, there were a handful of novelisations, and in the case of this show, we're looking at the very first Blake 7 novelisation, covering the first 4 episodes of the first season, as penned by Trevor Hoyle. When I was thinking who to talk to about this book, and Blake 7 in general, it only really made sense to ask my old mate John, because we've talked drunkenly about it down pub loads of times. Therefore, we decided to do it again, albeit in virtual Derry and Tom's, rather than some weird murder pub in Warrington. So, don your faded brown tabard and join us as we get framed for a horrific crime and shipped off on the penal transport to Cygnus Alpha, which gives us a long time to discuss Blake 7. We're back in Derry and Tom's, and I've got an all-new guest, who actually is an old mate of mine, so it's not like we're having to make introductions in terms of who are you, etc. But I've got John with me. Hello, John. Welcome to Derry and Tom's and Breakfast in the Ruins podcast.
Hello, big fan of the podcast, as you know. It's lovely to be here. Glad you invited me. I hope I don't ruin it for the listeners, but here we go.
And also a fan of beer, because actually the majority of our interactions generally tend to be about going to strange places in the north of England and drinking copious amounts of rail ale and cask beers in preferably the ropiest and the most intimidating pubs that we can hopefully find. So this is something of a switch, really. But we do tend to talk about all kinds of gubbins, like the type of thing we're going to talk about today. And I think it might have actually been an afternoon in the pub which prompted us to talk about what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, you know the score with new guests. What is your background when it comes to things like your involvement with genre fiction and science fiction and fantasy and things like that?
Well, very little, really. I was thinking about this, and I've been thinking about it a lot, that Michael Moorcock was a name I was familiar with, but it was more in relation to Hawkwind.
Yeah.
And I've read things like Tolkien, read The Hobbit as a kid, Lord of the Rings, and those things. And I loved science fiction films, but genre fiction, science fiction, I hadn't really tapped into at all. And so this is perhaps the first foray. I've read things. I've read Michael Moorcock since, on your recommendation, some of the shorter fiction. And I jumped in with Jerry Cornelius. And I thought, what is this madness here? It was a really strange story. And I thought, this probably isn't the best place to start. So I read some of the other stuff and I thought, I'm getting a feel for this. Of course, listening to your podcast makes it much more entertaining and easy to get into. So that was it, really. But as I say, Michael Moorcock was a name I knew, but I had no idea about who Elric was or all those stories that you talk about every couple of weeks or so. And I do listen to the podcast regularly and I do enjoy it. And of course, those forays into other fiction as well. But the James Herbert stuff, that's not something I've read, but of course, I'm aware of it from the films. So I know more about the film side than I would do reading those books.
Yeah. As it happens, something we decided to talk about today is one of those other things, because I remember a while back, and we're probably going back a couple of years, we were talking about Blake 7, and I think you'd gone on a Blake 7 marathon. I seem to recall us talking about that in the
That's right, yeah. I bought the box set. It was something I watched as a kid, and I loved it, but I don't think I ever finished watching it. Now, what the reason for that was, I can't remember. But I was looking back when it was on, and I'd have been, when it first broadcast was it 1978, 79, something like that? I was 7 years old. And it finished in 1981, I think, when I was 10. Now, it's possible. I think one of the last episodes was shown around December time. Now, if the snow had come out and there was snow outside and we were snowballing, building snowmen, I might have just gone outside and not realised, this is the last episode you're going to see. And, of course, the BBC wasn't great at repeating these things. So, for some reason, I'd watched a lot of it and I loved it. But I don't think I'd ever watched the last episode, and that's for sure. But as I watched through the box set, I thought, well, I've seen this one, and this was in Series 3. But there are always other temptations. People come knocking in your door, and you want to kick a football around, you want to go and throw snowballs. And out I went. And then, of course, you never see it again.
Yeah, so the first time around, you actually missed the season 4 finale.
I'm fairly sure I haven't seen that until I watched it on the box set. I'd already spoken to you and Yarky about it, and he said, oh, wait for the end, and he didn't tell me. And I watched it, and I was just blown away, because I think the thing was, when you watched it, you watch the first series, and there's a developing story, and then later on it becomes quite episodic in the way that, say, Star Trek is.
Mm.
So I'd looked at that and thought, well, these are just standalone episodes. And I probably as a 10-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, whatever, I didn't realise this is going to come to an end.
Mm.
So perhaps if I walked out and missed the last episode, I probably thought, well, it'll be on again, not realising, well, no, that's it. Because I don't think I had any idea that there was a developing story. I thought it'd just go on until it ended. There could have been a 5th series, a 6th series, whatever. But as it happened, there were 4. And it did come to a good conclusion. But I was completely unaware of that until about 8 or 9 years ago.
It is probably one of the most shocking TV climaxes, particularly in terms of the brutal violence and the amount of death and carnage in that climax. But we'll probably get to that because actually one of the themes as we're going to go along is that this was originally broadcast at 7 p.m. on a Monday night to a family audience. And there's some quite hair-raising things in there. And we'll get to some of those. But we're actually, on one level, talking about the novelisation of the first 4 episodes of the first Blake 7 series, originally published in 1978, not to be confused with some newer novelisations published by Big Finish a few years ago. In that case, the first 2 episodes were novelised by Paul Cornell. It'd be interesting to see how they differ, but we're going old school all the way with this one. And this Trevor Hoyle novelisation was fortunately reprinted in 2022. So listeners, if you're interested, you can actually get it at quite a good price now, whereas previously it could fetch quite a few bob on the second-hand market in good condition. That's still the case for the second one he wrote, as well as it happened, Project Avalon. The only way to get that is still to find the 1979 Ace paperback, and that still goes for a few quid. So I'm hoping that that'll get republished too. There were also a couple of others too. The third by Hoyle, which adapted episodes from season 4 for some reason. They skipped all the rest. But most interestingly, perhaps, there was the final one published back in the day was a continuation of the final story, which was called Blake, which I'd be absolutely fascinated to read because that series finale was famously brutal and definitive in many ways, even though it did leave one death just off screen. And actually that death is the one that they've managed to exploit the fact it wasn't on screen by actually continuing the story in a couple of ways. But that novel, Afterlife, was by Tony Attwood, and it's like rocking horse shit. So I'm not going to dwell on it too much because it's really hard to get hold of, unless, of course, that one gets a rerun. But that might not happen because Paul Darrow, Avon himself, later wrote and had published novels set after the end of the series that render Afterlife non-canonical. Blimey. What a twisted, tangled web of fiction and canon. But who is Trevor Hoyle, anyway? Well, he's still around at the grand old age of 84. He's a sci-fi novelist from Rochdale, as it happens. Rochdale, I think, is one of our to-do list places when it comes to going for an afternoon on the Source. So perhaps
I've been to Rochdale before. It's perfect for us. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
I cannot wait.
Yeah, we're going to do Rochdale in honour of Trevor Hoyle.
Yeah.
But most interestingly, probably of his works for fans of this podcast, perhaps, are the Q series of novels, which were published by Panther in the 1970s, that chronicle the adventures of Christian Quegan, a myth technologist from the planet Earth 4N. The first book is called Seeking the Mythical Future. The third is called The Gods Look Down, but the second one, I think, is probably the most intriguing sounding. In Through the Eye of Time, a group of scientists attempt to duplicate the human brain. They choose that of Adolf Hitler as their prototype.
Why not?
And investigating the research, Quegan unveils an alternate universe in which Germany, as opposed to the United States, developed the first atomic bomb, and his quest becomes to enter this other reality in an attempt to avert the threat it poses to the known reality. And the 1970s Panther paperback has got an amazing cover of Hitler with a nuclear explosion in the background. Yeah, give me some of that. But check out trevorhoyle.com for more details on him, and there's quite a few interviews out there as well. Given that we're talking about going beer in Rochdale, I think it's that time of the podcast where I say, I've been trying to figure out what kind of space-themed booze I could drink while we talk about Blake 7. But what are you having?
Well, I'm drinking, it's a local drink, and it's a brewer called Titanic. So I'm going back hundreds of years. This Titanic brewery has been around, I'm talking from a different time zone, as you'll know, in Stoke-on-Trent.
Yep.
And this is a brewery that's been around since about 1985. And this is a very nice cherry porter, which I've not tried before. They do a very good plum porter that you can get on draft, which is quite a strong drink and a nice drink. I like those. I know you like drinking those dark drinks. Because I went to a craft beer place last week. I thought I'll pick some up for the podcast. was one of those places where you get jam, roly-poly and custard stout for £5 a can. And I thought, well, I'm not having that. I'll have something I'm a bit more familiar with and it's going to get me absolutely slaughtered on a Saturday afternoon. So I thought, this is quite a nice one. And it's a nice, rich 4.9%. So quite strong, smooth, fruity and dark. Very nice, very drinkable. I've got a stout and a plum porter as well to come as well. But this is a nice colour, a nice drink. You might be able to hear me pouring that out. But I'd recommend that. I don't know. There are Titanic pubs in Stoke-on-Trent, and they're well worth a visit.
Yeah, I've had the Titanic plum porter, and it's very nice. And I know our friend Ian, aka Biomass Art, is a big fan of Titanic plum porter. I actually have had it in a pub in Lancaster as well.
Yeah.
And it's very nice because you do get that in supermarkets, but it's lovely.
Yeah, I drank about 4 pints of it one night, which isn't a lot. But I remember coming home and puking it all up. And of course, you can taste it as it comes up, and you think, "Oh, never again." So I had to leave off it for about a year or so. Yeah. But I put it down. I think it was a bad pint because it tasted nice. But then 4 pints shouldn't have had me puking, but it did. But
you always get that risk, don't you, with hand pulled cask beer? If there's any kind of issue with it, if there's any kind of hygiene problems with the equipment or anything like that, I think it's like drinking cask ale is like playing a role-playing game when you go in some slightly less salubrious pubs where you can't entirely rely on the hygiene of the establishment. And the amount of times I've had 15 pints over the course of a day and an evening and been absolutely fine, and then another day I've had 4 pints and I've ended up throwing up in the bog. Probably the last time that was in Manchester drinking Robinson's bitter. Yeah. Bad news. That was a while ago, though.
They do some very strong ones, don't they, Robinson's? Is it Old Tom? Which is about 9%. I've drunk that before, and I didn't realise. Because you sit in the pub with your head swimming and thinking, what have I just drunk then? And you realise later on, oh, yeah, that's why. But, those strong drinks sometimes, especially when they're fruity and craft ales, they can hit you quite hard.
Yeah. Well, you know what? When it came to my choices about what kind of space-themed booze I could drink, I've been battling a bit of a cold this week. So I've just had a blackcurrant lemsip, which I was going to put booze in, but I forgot. So I'm just going to finish my lemsip, and then I'm going to show you what I've got. My choice, and this is about as space age as I could get, is Phil's been getting me this mystery Fanta pop, which is purple and quite strange tasting. So I'm going to stick some of this in a glass. Yep. I'm going to put some of that in a glass. So that's a lovely, strange, almost iridescent, cloudy purple. And I'm going to put in it cherry marshmallow gin. And this is about as space age as I can get. And I'm not sure what the drinks cabinet on the Liberator would contain. Actually, I've got a pretty good idea, because when I was writing my notes earlier, I made an observation about Zen and the Bridge of the Liberator, but we'll get to that. But for now, I'm having cherry marshmallow gin with Fanta mystery pop. So let's see how hideous this tastes. That actually tastes completely amazing. So That was a good choice.
Yeah, well done.
Right, so this bloody book. Now, as we talk about this book, I think we're going to have to kind of skip back and forth between the book and the TV show. And I just binge-watched all 4 episodes, which this book actually novelises. Because this book is like a classic novelisation of a TV show, just like, I don't know, James Blish novelised a lot of the 60s Star Trek series called Log 1 and Log 2 and all that business. And it would novelise different episodes. The Space 1999 novelisations did the same. They would novelise a couple of episodes, generally from the scripts, rather than the finished TV episodes, so you got mild differences between them. And then they would try and sort of jury-rig them up in order to form one narrative arc, so it didn't feel quite so much like 2 episodes. Not entirely successfully for me. But actually, in the case of the first 4 episodes of Blake 7, they do form a continuous arc. From Blake being on Earth through to them actually finally getting the 7 crew members. 7 if you count Zen, the ship's computer. But the first part of this book and the first episode of the TV show, how would you summarise it?
I think this is the best part of the book. And it's those first few episodes are some of my favourite episodes. And to some extent, you can see why. Is it Gareth Edwards who played Blake?
Gareth Thomas.
Gareth Thomas, sorry.
Yeah.
I can see why he left it. In that it's a very different tale as it develops. But these early ones are really, really strong episodes, and I think that's captured really well. Now, I don't know whether part of the reasoning behind this feeling is that as I got halfway through the book, I realised we aren't coming to a great climax here. This is just part of a longer story. But I thought the first 6 or 7 chapters are the strongest of the book, and it is dark and dystopian as you could ask for. And you think, as we mentioned before, this is shown at 7 o'clock on a Monday evening in the UK.
Yeah.
It really is powerful stuff.
It's like a dystopian future setup, isn't it? You've got people living in a domed city. It very, very quickly establishes, and I think the TV show does this really, really well as well. You've got the immediate establishment of a closed-circuit TV monitored surveillance society. We find out in the first handful of minutes that the population is not only under constant observation, but drugged into compliance and restricted to a sterile, nature-free, isolated environment. It's really brisk, it's really punchy, and our core character, our key, well, obviously because it's called Blake 7, is Rog Blake, who is being encouraged to go to a gathering of dissidents by somebody who's suggesting that he is under the influence not only of the drugs that are suppressing everybody in the society, but also he may have undergone treatment which has essentially blocked out his memories of his prior role in this dissident organisation. It's a really good instant setup. I think that stuff was quite common in 70s TV sci-fi as well. There was loads of TV sci-fi, like stuff like The Guardians, 1990, all sorts of things which were about a more immediate, knackered future Britain. But this is far future. This is space opera level. But it's still that like 1984 or Brave New World kind of societal setup. And we know that Blake is some kind of important character within all of that. And one thing that's really clear as well when you're watching the TV show is the muted earth colours. So everybody is wearing... The entire colour palette looks like it was based on a packet of Old English Spangles. Everybody's wearing like dark green or dark brown or dark cream earthy colours. And then Blake gets out there into this meeting, and there are a couple of things that happen. One is a mysterious guy who's limping is following them. Turns out when they get to the gathering that actually he's one of the gathering. But is he? That will come back to haunt them. And the other is there is a brutal massacre. There is a brutal massacre of the dissidents by the security forces of the Federation. This is a very, very different Federation to the Star Trek Federation. So it's a great setup, isn't it? And it's really brisk storytelling. It's amazing how much to fit into that first episode, or that first part of the book.
Yeah, it moves so quickly. And I love those parts with Blake trying to come to terms with his past and trying to recall it. And he looks back at himself sometimes, almost like he's another person. And he sees himself almost in it. And I think that's really good writing, that he puts it there and he starts to envisage this past. And it's almost like there's another Rog Blake. And that is a really powerful thing. And I love that when I first started reading it, I thought, is this just going to be like a transcript or a screenplay where it just it's the dialogue? But there's good writing in there as well, which impressed me and made me... I knew I'd enjoy it anyway, because of familiarity with the story. But the fact that it's written so well, certainly in the early chapters, was very pleasing.
Yeah, I think it starts to rattle along a little bit further on. I think at the early part of this, I think Trevor Hoyle is really into it. I think this stuff is speaking to him as a writer. I think later on, by the time we get to the Cygnus Alpha stuff, it starts to get a little bit more sketchy. But that's
exactly my thinking. Yeah, he starts to repeat himself sometimes. You get these parts. I wrote them down where Jenna, we're jumping ahead a bit here, but she keeps sobbing with relief. She does that 3 or 4 times. And Blake is constantly sighing, and you think, I imagine Trevor Hoyle is sitting there sighing as well, thinking, when's this going to end? But
there's probably
an enthusiasm at the start of the book, which I think makes it a lot stronger. And I think he's rattling towards the end in the final 3 or 4 chapters.
Yeah, and really, the first... Actually, I like the second part as well, but we'll get to that. But the first part is the really great stuff. All the ideas are packed into that first part. So within the first, 2 or 3 chapters, the first 15 minutes of the episode, you've got this setup with the society, and then everybody gets brutally murdered. In the TV version, you get this brutal massacre, complete with squibs. I mean, they're sparky squibs rather than bloody squibs, but still really, really effective, still really brutal. This is probably 7:15 on a Monday night in 1978. You've got these security forces just brutally massacring all of these hippies, these dissident hippies. It's a really, really fantastic first act. Then we get the really interesting part, which is, and this is something that I didn't think about for years, and this only really sunk in with me when I binge watched the DVD box set when I got them, I don't know, 15 years ago, whenever it was. I never really remembered this. I did dimly remember the opening episodes, but what I didn't remember is that the way the Federation sets up Blake, because of course what we find is that Blake originally was a dissident, but because they thought he would be too much of a martyr if they killed him, executed him, got him out of the way, they decided to mess with his brain, make him go on, effectively, television, denounce his former comrades and former activities, and just become part of normal society again, which he did. So this time, they've got the same similar problem again. He was there for the massacre. They've captured him again. What do they do this time? Well, they can't do the same as last time, but similarly, they can't kill him again because once again, they create a martyr. So what do? They frame him as a paedophile. It's absolutely incredible. They frame Blake as a paedophile. And the lengths the authority goes to set up the evidence base to frame Blake, our hero, as a nonce is genuinely horrific. And it absolutely blew my mind. And reading it written down in the novel again really, really makes it much more stark and distinct again. Because in the novel, I don't think you really pick up that the person who comes up with a scheme, this Morag, this middle-aged, kindly-looking old woman, Morag, the prosecutor, she's the one who says that they can use medical technology to implant the memories of being molested by Blake into children and then interview them as witnesses and take their evidence. That's just fucking incredible, isn't it?
It's one of the worst things you could ever read and imagine. And I was thinking about this. You're shocked at how strong and horrendous this is.
Yeah.
But also I was thinking, what's the selection criteria for this? Did they just go into the school and say, "Hi kids, do you want a day off school?" "Oh yeah, yes please sir, yes please sir."
Oh my God.
And then, "Where are we going?" "We're going to the zoo." "No, we're going to the clinic." "What?" No, you volunteered, come on." "Oh, where are we going?" "No." It is awful. Brilliant as well. It's so fiendish, and it makes perfect sense within the novel. That's the thing, because you think you don't want to make a martyr of Rog Blake at all.
No.
And so to do this, and it seems strangely modern as well, to denounce someone as a paedophile. Happens all the time nowadays on the internet. You look at Hillary Clinton; those allegations were made towards her, and it's so effective, so effective to do that.
Yeah,
and so it seems strangely modern.
Even after having rewatched this 15 years ago when I binge watched the series, I don't know if I picked it up at the time, and I don't know if I only really registered it from the book. Because when you're watching something on the box, you're, I don't know, drinking a cup of tea, or you're dunking a biscuit, or your attention's wandering elsewhere. But when you read it on the page, and there is that simple paragraph that says, "Oh, doctor, that technology that you got where you can implant experiences and people really believe they're real." He says, "Yes." And then what unfolds is, and actually the lawyer who represents Blake at the trial thinks this evidence is far too perfect. And he uncovers the evidence of the children having days off school coinciding exactly with unregistered patients going to the clinic where these procedures are performed, and puts two and two together. It's amazing. So not only does he get framed as a paedophile, they implant memories of molestation into the minds of children so they can make a strong evidence base.
And do they
it's
go
unbelievable.
Back? Do they go back and take him out? Or do they just leave him in there?
I've absolutely no idea.
Tough luck, kids.
Yeah, it's amazing. So
yeah, and it's not just hinted at, is it?
No.
It's stated explicitly. You don't have to work that out and think, "Oh, hang on a minute, what's going on here?" It's written down on the page, and you think, this is 1 or 2 chapters in.
Yeah.
And it's the same on the TV program. It's not hidden away somewhere. You wonder how they pitched it. They said, what's his first scene about? Oh, we're just going to show this bit. And you think, oh, how did that? But you never get made today. Imagine the uproar.
No, well, yeah, it certainly wouldn't be on at 7 o'clock on a Monday
No,
night.
exactly right. You can have these stories, but they wouldn't be on just before Ask the Family.
Yeah, I've got this brilliant idea, boss. I've got a pitch that we can put on opposite the One show.
yeah.
It's like, what the fuck?
It might just work.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that's the setup for Blake's predicament.
But these are fiendish people, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Just the worst. I mean, you imagine they are beyond Nazis, because you think in the 70s, that was a big feature where people would say, we'll draw a parallel here with the Nazis. But to go back to what you said earlier, this is more like 1984, I think, than that. And these people, are as horrific, if not more so. Just horrible federation.
You're absolutely right. The amount of things that can fly around in terms of conspiracy theories or just accusations on social media or anything else that stick. Essentially, what they've done is they've cancelled Blake.
Yeah.
Not only they've cancelled his reputation and put it in the bin, and they're sending him off to a penal colony on Cygnus Alpha. And, sadly for Blake, he has that last moment of hope where he thinks that his lawyer is on his side and his lawyer's figured all this out. His lawyer does figure all this out. He goes along with his missus, they uncover the site of the massacre, they take pictures of it, and then unfortunately they get brutally moidered on the way out, and Blake ends up getting sent off on this prison ship anyway. But one of the interesting things in the TV show, the limping guy who goes to and ends up being a traitor, the guy who dobbed them in, is called Dev Tarrant.
Yeah.
Is it ever explained over the course of the series why Dev Tarrant was a traitor, but Del Tarrant ends up joining the crew of the Liberator in season 3? Is there ever an explanation of the similarity in the names, or is it just coincidence?
I did have a look at this, and are they brothers or something like that? I seem to remember looking at that. I don't look into it deeply. But I'm sure it mentions that they are. Because when I first read it, I thought, hang on, is this the Tarrant who comes into it later? And it isn't. But I've got a feeling they are related in some way.
Yeah, I do wonder if in like some kind of... that Tony Atwood guy who did the fourth novel for Ace Books, he wrote like a guide to Blake 7 as well. It'd be interesting to read that to see if there's any, additional background information that it isn't actually mentioned in any scripts or any dialogue in the actual series, but any of these sort of side fluff around the series that actually expands upon this in any way. Because, of course, what we find with these evil bastards like Morag and Dev Tarrant, none of them get the comeuppance. Because by the time we're a few episodes in, the villains become Servalan and Travis, is it? Yeah. So we never really hear of this lot again. So you've got this, like, political thriller framing of Blake, and all these people just get away with it scot-free, including the murder of the lawyers.
Yeah, I do wonder if there are different ways of telling the story, and perhaps they have an idea and then drop it. So perhaps those brothers would be part of it and then say, oh no, let's change direction and take it somewhere else. Because there is a part with the implantation of the memories with the children that doesn't make sense. In that seems to happen while Blake is in jail.
Yeah.
And you think, well, if it happened, when's he supposed to have attacked these children? Presumably it's before he was in jail. So I think there is a goof there that is in the program. It's just being copied into the book. That doesn't quite make sense to me.
Yeah, on the other hand, the authority are essentially so blatantly corrupt that they don't even care.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah.
They don't give a rat's ass, because I suppose when it comes to like the trappings of all those scenes, you've got the courtrum scene, and I enjoy the courtroom scene in the book. In the TV version, they make it a little bit more funky and futuristic.
Yeah,
but in the book, you've got the court computer's judgment consists of a reel-to-reel tape, with the prosecution tape and the defence tape. Because of course, when Terry Nation's writing the script in the 1970s, big powerful computers are just spinning reels of tape, aren't they? So the defence and prosecution reels are fed in, then it spits out a verdict. But that's what supercomputers looked like in the 70s. So there's no real attempt there to pre-configure technological developments. But there is that projection that computers will replace core societal functions like systems of justice.
It's judgment by AI.
Yes, exactly.
You just feed the information in there, and you think, how far are we away from that? You can't be that far, but people will just put your evidence in. The computer says you're guilty. And off you go.
That's the really interesting thing about this as well, because reading the book, I think the technology in the book, coming from the Terry Nation scripts, it's obvious that Terry Nation really didn't have too much of a handle on technology, and we see
No.
that later on as well.
Well, I think
Technology or science.
It might be on page 1, where he starts talking about a wrist chronometer. And you think,
what, a watch?
It's a watch, mate. It's a watch, mate. What are you talking?
Yeah.
Just call it a watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just daft.
Well, it's funny. Some sci-fi is visionary with amazing projections of the future and technology and developments. Other sci-fi can kind of be regarded as quite staid and progressive in terms of imagination. But Blake 7 is like, okay, they're all wearing flares. They're all wearing old English spangle-coloured tabards. The sets are wobbly and everything else. But actually, the context of what's going on, all the things we've just talked about, the mass control of populations through additives in food and drinking water.
Yeah.
Well, a little light bit of research on drinking water experiments. Yeah. It's all good fodder for grim SF, but it's all also probably 40 years before its time. A lot of this
That's
stuff.
Right, yeah.
You know, judgment by AI. Yeah, it's all incredible stuff. Another couple of notes on the TV version as well. The reel-to-reel tape upload to the court computer is a bit more funky and futuristic. So nice work from the set production team there. And a note on the Federation soldier costumes. I was watching this again the other day, and I was thinking, they kind of look reminiscent of the SAS gear that become embedded in the public consciousness with the Libyan embassy siege. But that was several years later. So they've got this. So some of the design is really dated, but the design for the Federation soldiers still looks fucking great.
Yeah, they're terrifying, aren't they?
Yeah, the face masks, the helmets, the whole black boot boy approach. You know, it's all great stuff.
Yeah. Can I just go back to a bit here that made me laugh? I've written
go.
Ha ha in the margin. It just says, in sentencing you, the justice machine has taken into account your past record, your service to the state, and your loyalty to the administration. None of these have mitigated in your favour. Oh, I had my hopes up there.
Yeah.
It's so crooked. Yeah, the justice machine.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Meeting Villa and Jenna for the first time. Although, funnily enough, it turns out that I found out from listening to the DVD commentary on episode 2, Spacefall, that was filmed first. So, but this is the first time chronologically in the series we meet Villa and Jenna. Villa's great. Obviously, will go on to be one of the only 2 series regulars throughout all 4 seasons, along with Avon. Those 2 have incredible chemistry throughout. I think all of the real treasure in the later seasons of Blake 7 are Avon and Villa interactions.
Yeah.
One in which I remember in particular my dad howling his head off in laughter at, where, and this is, I don't know, it could be something to do with the dodgy signs, but at one point they have to, I can't remember whether they're on the Liberator or on another ship, but they need to lighten the load of the ship. And half the episode is Avon chasing Villa around.
Unbelievable.
so he can throw him out of an airlock.
I forgot about that. Yeah, it's like a weird episode of Tom and Jerry.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible.
But Villa is a genuinely funny character.
Yes, he gets some absolutely amazing lines.
Yeah, he's superb.
And his delivery is great as well. It's interesting. In the book, this is a common theme with all the characters as they're described in the book. Villa's described as gargoyle-faced.
Yeah, harsh.
Yeah, a bit harsh. Michael Keaton actually isn't a bad-looking bloke, but he does his physicality and his physical performance of his projection of like cowardliness and everything else is just pitch perfect.
Yeah,
and I've often wondered what happened to Michael Keaton after Blake 7 because I don't ever recall him seeing much. But apparently, he had a recurring role in as a vicar in EastEnders for years.
Did he?
Yeah, so there you go. It's not the first time EastEnders will get a mention in this. For our international listeners, EastEnders is a long-running British soap opera that's on TV 3 or 5 nights a week or whatever, I don't know. And probably there are a handful of TV shows in the UK which just about every actor who ever becomes famous has travelled through. A lot of them end up in bit parts on EastEnders, and loads of them used to be on The Bill, which was a police soap opera. I guess the equivalent is any attractive Australian actor who makes it big in Hollywood was either on Neighbours or Home and Away. So similar kind of thing. But of course, we also get to meet Jenna. And Jenna's description in the book is quite dissimilar to her appearance in the TV show. She's described more in the book like a sort of Raquel Welch type femme fatale in black leather. She's not like that in the TV show. Nevertheless, 7 or 8 year old me was infatuated with Jenna. Even now, at 51, I can't say I feel that dissimilarly. Jenna is awesome. And I'm still gutted that she just vanished at the end of series 2. That was terrible for me as a kid. And I'm still unhappy about that now. But yeah, what can you do? She actually went on to be a theatre director. Directed lots and lots of theatre in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah,
So
what's her name in real? Is it Sally something?
yeah, Sally Nivette. Yeah.
Nivette, yeah.
Yeah, and she said she was fed up of how she had so little to do after being established as this cool space smuggler pirate, and
Yeah,
then just kind of got relegated to being like the ship's housewife. So she
yeah.
decided
It's
to
not good,
leave.
is it? Because they do have strong female characters in it,
Yeah,
just to start with, and
yeah,
if that falls away, it's no wonder that she's going to walk away at some point.
yeah. It's a shame she had to leave for Dana to come in and take on that strong female character
Yeah,
thing from season 3. That's a real shame. I mean, I liked Dana. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we've got this situation now where Blake has almost been saved by his legal representation, but they've both been murdered as well by the dastardly Dev Tarrant, who never will get his comeuppance. But it turns out that when it comes to being a prisoner, there is no Rule 45 on Cygnus Alpha or on prison transports because he just gets to mingle with the general prisoner population. So we move on to part 2 of the book, sort of episode 2 of the series, The Prison Barge and the Discovery of the Liberator. Whilst we've had the first part being like a political thriller, now we've got our prison drama while they're en route to Cygnus Alpha, and we have a cracking villain, Sub-Commander Raker, who's a nasty piece of work. Once again, for 7 o'clock on a Monday night, a thinly veiled rapist and a cold-blooded murderer. Because there's a bit where he says the captain says to him, Raker, one of the prisoners is a female. Be discreet. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. He really is a bastard, isn't he?
He's awful, isn't he? And the actor who plays him is really, really good at making you hate him too.
Yeah.
It's terrific. Sammy, how do you sum up this part? Well, it's again, I think we find in a couple of these episodes there's 2 concurrent tracks going on. So you've got the scenes in the prison barge prisoner area, and you've got the scenes on the bridge, because we've got 2 things going on at the same time. You've got all the prisoners meeting each other. So we meet Villa and Jenna again. We meet Gan, who becomes a series regular till probably early season 2. And a whole lot of other prisoners who turn out to be quite disposable, because most of them get brutally murdered by Sub-Commander Raker. But this intro to the core characters, the grim tone again, mixed with this idea that as the ship is en route to Cygnus Alpha, they accidentally happen upon a mysterious space battle between 2 unknown forces. We never really find out who they are, but they come across an adrift futuristic ship that they don't recognise. It's huge, it's technologically advanced, and they decide, or the crew decide, there could be a lot of money in that. So whilst we've had the prisoners basically having a riot, trying to escape with some level of a success, they managed to send Avon through the walls of the ship to get into the computer room to overtake the computer, where he has a terrific scrap with a computer operator. We meet Avon, of course, which I've just skimmed over. We don't only meet Gan, we meet Avon. We meet Paul Darrow's Avon, who, quite frankly, is the greatest character in televisual space opera of all time.
Yeah,
hands down,
I
no
agree.
arguments.
Totally. Just a wonderful, morally ambiguous character. A wonderful man. And he's not a bad man, but not necessarily a good man either.
No.
And he will only look out for himself, as we mentioned before with that scene later on with Villa.
Yeah.
He just really wants what will get him through, regardless of the cost.
He's morally ambivalent. He has a brilliantly antagonistic relationship with Blake and with Jenna. He looks at Jenna with abject disgust at times because she's always backing Blake up. And some of the looks he gives her are just absolutely incredible. The performance
Not always.
is amazing.
There's a scene later on I'll mention. I'll come on to that. It's fantastic.
Weirdly, in the book, he's described as, how is he described in the book?
He's
dome-headed,
big eyes, big pale eyes or something.
Yeah, big pale eyes, dome-headed. But the lines that are written down on the page, the acerbic, sarcastic, dismissive lines, you just read them in Paul Darrow's voice, don't you? I think that's the case very much with Avon and Villa. The lines on the page in the novelisation, you read them entirely in their voices.
It just captures them entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does.
And that's not down to the writing. That is just the strength of the characters, and he's just transcribed what they said.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
that cynicism comes right through.
It's great dialogue that's written for them, and they deliver it with real gusto.
Yeah.
But on the DVD commentary is with producer David Maloney, Sally Nivet, and Michael Keating. And there's only, on the first disc, there's only a commentary on this episode. But this episode, apparently, used up almost all of the budget, the special effects budget for season 1.
God.
Was all burned on this episode. And I suppose it makes sense in a way. You've got multiple sets for the penal transport. You've got multiple sets for the Liberator. You've got all the model work, and apparently some of the model work of the prisoner transport just flying over things like... There are some really amusingly quaint shots now when you see the model work shots of it flying over a spinning, like, planetoid. Apparently they all cost an absolute fortune. But I couldn't help but laugh at one point, because as a Doctor Who and Blake 7 fan, I can entirely forgive the wobbly sets and special effects, but the prison barge made me laugh out loud for one reason. The first shot you get of all the prisoners sitting in the seats, the front seat that Jenna's on is an office chair complete with casters. It's brilliant. But, I mean, otherwise, it goes down pretty much as per the novelisation. Notwithstanding some differences about the Liberator, but the real revelation is Avon, because Avon is the fucking boss. But point of interest, Raker, the nasty, rapey, murdering subcommander. So Leslie Schofield, who played Raker, will be familiar to almost any sci-fi fan, but not just sci-fi fans, because he's pretty much immortalised as Grand Moff Tarkin's right-hand man on the Death Star.
Right.
Yeah, so he's the guy who says, we've analysed their attacks there, and there could be a weakness. And Grand Moff Tarkin says, evacuate in our moment of triumph. I think you overestimate their chances. So whenever you see Peter Cushing in Star Wars, Leslie Schofield is stood by him in a uniform and one of the peaked hats. So he's absolutely immortalised in Star Wars history. And Hela filmed this episode the year Star Wars was released.
Yeah.
1977, probably, because Star Wars didn't come out until the 27th of December, 1977. So it'll still been in cinemas when this episode was broadcast on the 9th of January, 1978. And, probably for months and months after that as well. So he was a busy dude at the time. And he was in a couple of different Doctor Who serials in the 70s. He was in Force 10 from Navarone in 1978 with Harrison Ford, the shit Navarone film that I'm still nevertheless quite fond of. But outside of SF, another running theme, he's probably most famous for being in EastEnders and proposing to Pat Butcher. Yeah, I don't know if it was after Frank Butcher died or after Roy died, but he proposed to Pat Butcher, which is a really, really weird Blake 7 coincidence, which we'll come back to later. Yeah, fascinating. So yeah, Leslie Schofield, brilliantly acted as an absolute bastard, or maybe that guy was just, had that thing around him of being a bit of a bastard. But he does meet an excellent end by getting blasted out of the connection tube.
Yeah.
Probably after murdering loads of other people.
Yeah.
But so many connections with Doctor Who as well. The producers and directors just about all came from Doctor Who. That's probably not any kind of surprise. Michael Keating in the DVD commentary recalls that the computer room operator stuntman that Avon had a scrap with was ex-SAS. And that is one of the best fights in Blake 7, in all of Blake 7. It's really short, but a lot of Blake 7, the fights tend to be neck chop, guy falls over. But this is really, really dirty. It's got face gouging. It's got a brilliant... Avon's getting his face gouged by this guy. This guy's got his thumb in his gob and he's pulling at his face. And he gives him a brutal head ear slap, which is absolutely amazing. Love it.
Yeah, that's straight from wrestling, isn't it, on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Even the meat slap sounds of the punches sound great. Yeah. But another interesting thing on the DVD commentary, Sally Nivet says that years later, Terry Nation said to her at a convention in America that he wished he'd given her a more active role. All I can say is, hindsight is a great thing, Terry, but I'll always blame you for not getting more Jenna Stannis.
Yeah.
Although we did get the pleasure of Glynis Barber in season 4, so not a total loss.
That's Sulin, the character she plays.
Yeah, that's right. So 10-year-old me was generally quite satisfied with Glynis Barber.
Well, it's good stuff. Yeah.
And
And we
51
haven't
year
even
old.
mentioned Servalan, have we? So.
Oh, God, yeah. That's the saddest thing about all this, is that Servalan doesn't appear in any of these episodes. She didn't
No, I
appear
was
in this
waiting for it
book.
to come into it, and
Yeah,
the same with Travis. I thought, is this Travis now? And you
yeah.
forget, what part of the story they're telling. And each time a new character comes in, oh, maybe this is them.
Mm,
Those cryogenically frozen characters. You think, oh, is this how it came about?
mm.
And it isn't. So that's a disappointment. But
Well,
those delights are to
maybe,
come.
for the benefit of people who've never seen Blake 7, we maybe need to explain Servalan.
Yeah, I mean, really, just you talk about Jenna. I think Servalan's had a profound effect on me. That
Oh, yeah.
beautiful angular face, short
Yeah.
dark hair, and the most inappropriate clothes for someone walking around distant planets you've ever seen.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
one where she walks in some sandy beach somewhere in the dunes. I'm sure she's
Yeah.
wearing like little kitten heels. And you think, oh,
Yeah.
just put a pair of boots on, sir. No, I've got this dress split. She's a bit like Joan Collins.
Yeah.
Imagine Joan Collins walking around the sandy dunes.
Yeah, she's like a cross between Joan Collins and Liza Minnelli in Cabaret.
Yeah.
The close cropped hair.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Fabulous look.
The foxy, sensuous approach to everything, the way she walks, the way she talks. She's deliciously evil.
Yeah.
She's horny evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Incredible. Yeah. And sadly, we won't see her. And the DVDs that I watched, you don't see her on the DVDs either, but she is in one of the DVD menus. So, I got a little taste of Servalan. But she's an incredible character, and she is, again, once she's introduced, she is persistently the villain. She has Travis. The two different actors play Travis. The first guy was great. I think Brian Croucher played him after that. I wasn't mad keen on Brian Croucher. He wasn't.
Yeah, the first one's Stephen Grief, isn't it?
Stephen Grief, yeah.
Who's also known from Citizen Smith, I think. And again, a great-looking villain.
Yeah.
He's the sort of man you think he can only play a villain. He just looks the part. Absolutely perfect. And a fabulous actor. And why they left him behind, I don't know. But it's a loss.
He must have got another job doing something else. Whereas Brian Crouch is a bit. Yeah, Brian Crouch is a bit like East End thug. By comparison.
Yeah.
He's not got the same level of gravitas.
No.
Yeah, and
he hasn't got the same eye patch.
The eye patch gets smaller, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just rubbish. It's like something you just get from a novelty shop.
Yeah. Interesting point about Glynis Barber, though. Early on in the episodes with Travis, where he's on his ship, he has a female crew. I think he calls them mutoids. And they're all in black and they have weird black hats. Glynis Barber plays one of the mutoids. That was her first appearance in Blake 7. So, yeah, Glynis Barber factoid there. So, yeah, sadly, we don't get to see or hear from Servalan in this, but you know what? Servalan will always be in our hearts. So, yeah. So, quick intermission before we move on to the third part. So, observations about this as a novelisation of 4 episodes of a TV show. I think it works really well. We've got an ongoing story with a clear arc, unlike later seasons where it was a lot looser and became a lot more episodic.
Yeah.
There's a nice clear delineation with the episodes. Part 1's a political thriller. Part 2's an escape and heist. Part 3 is a rescue caper. And Part 4 is like a sabotage mission crossed with a space siege sort of knockoff. I think they're all distinctly packaged, but it all flows quite nicely in this novel. It does suffer a little bit from the episode structure in that, I suppose, as opposed to a 3 or 4 act story structure. It sort of ends on a glib note.
Yeah.
I'm guessing most people that bought this were watchers of the show anyway, so it probably wasn't that big of a deal.
When I read it before Christmas, that was in my mind, and I thought, oh yeah, this isn't really going to go anywhere just yet.
Yeah.
And so that marred my enjoyment of the second half. But
yeah,
I read it again in the last week, just sped through it, and I thought, no, there's still some good stuff in here. And it's well worth reading.
Yeah.
How much it means to people who've never seen the TV series, I'm not quite sure. But
yeah,
there is a good story there.
Yeah, basically, it introduces the important characters, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the most important, of course, being Avon. Because one of the intriguing things about a show called Blake 7 is that Blake drops out of the show for the most part after season 2, and it's Darrow's Avon that becomes the de facto leader of the gang.
Yeah.
And I think Blake comes back once.
Yeah.
In season 3 or early season 4.
Yeah, he's some sort of he's almost like a hologram or something. He's frozen. And again, reading that, whether that's really him or a vision of him isn't clear.
Yeah.
I remember watching that as a 10-year-old thinking, I'm watching a show called Blake 7, and the hero Blake isn't in it. I love Avon, so I'm not that bothered. I'm like, oh, there's Blake. What's he doing in that box? I've got no idea.
Yeah.
but I'll carry on watching anyway because I love the thing.
But of course, as we've kind of gently suggested, he does come back in the very final episode, which is called
Well,
Blake.
yeah.
And you know what? I don't think we'll spoil it. Or
No,
should we
no,
spoil it? I don't
no.
think we should spoil it.
But I haven't really rewatched the episodes. I thought, let's talk about the book. And I think if you jump too far ahead,
Yeah.
we're overlooking the good parts. So it's unavoidable. We'll talk about that. But I thought rather than get distracted by watching the TV series, I'll just read the book and judge it on its own merits.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll always have burned. All I'll say about the final episode is that Paul Darrow's delivery of one line is burned into my brain.
Yeah.
And it's, did you betray us? Did you betray me? It's just absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Anyway, back end of part 2 stroke episode 2, we get to the Liberator. Time to talk about the Liberator. Now, the book description is fairly simple. Of course, we've got the situation where they've rebelled. It's kind of gone wrong because Reika has used this brutal method of getting them out of the computer room, i.e. executing a prisoner every 30 seconds until they surrender. And everyone's like, no, we shouldn't surrender. And Blake is like, yeah, we're surrendering because I'm a man of the people.
Yeah.
And then even after he's surrendered, Reika, just because he's a bastard, shoots one more prisoner.
Yeah. And he says to Blake, you would have won. Because Blake isn't that sort of man.
Yeah.
If he'd been negotiating with Avon would have just watched them all die and then taken over the ship. But that's the thing about Blake. He is a good man from start to finish.
You would have won Blake,
why
but you
people
were
would
too
follow
weak.
Yeah, you're too good.
But they've got this scheme, so they send over 3 crew members to the Liberator. All they hear is them coming back over the intercom, screaming and going slightly weird. So they decide, right, we'll send over prisoners, which is their key error in the end, I think. Well, I say it's their key error, but it's certainly an error for Reika because he comes a cropper. But the Captain Leyland and the rest of his crew, afterwards, they all end up just dropping the prisoners off on Cygnus Alpha, and they get away, and we never see them again either. So they never really get any kind of comeuppance. But I guess they were just doing their job. Reika was the bad man. But they go across to the Liberator. Because of Blake's history with brainwashing, he's able to overcome the psychological trap that's been set. He saves Avon. He saves Jenna. That's a nice little callback to all of his flashbacks to having his brain messed with in episode 1.
I do like that bit.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
What's ultra cool is when he stops Avon and he gives Avon a shove. Paul Darrow does the most incredible over-the-top stuntman backwards roll over the little sofa because he's so committed. It's one of the great things about the Liberator Bridge. In the book, the Liberator Bridge is described, I'm sure as it was described in the script, and it's not really overly described. But one thing you've got to give the production design team props for in the series, the Bridge of the Liberator is fucking great.
Yeah.
And again, it's unique and unlike anything else in science fiction. Okay, certain things, parts of the set wobble a little bit, but it's so ambitious, and the design work is so inspired and way beyond anything in the script or the novel that it could define on paper. It looks incredible. And the model work, the exterior of the Liberator, the actual design of it is so iconic. I think it's one of the greatest looking ships in science fiction.
Yeah, just a beautiful thing. And the way it's described, the people who first see it fall in love with it in the way that you would have done watching the TV series. It's on the front cover of the book, and it does look spectacular. Yeah. And you compare it to some of the other things within the series, you think that is one thing that stands up and does look, it's a beautiful design.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And in episode 3, at the beginning of episode 3, we get a little bit more design on it, a little bit more of the look on the design as well. And we meet Zen, the onboard computer. And the design for Zen, this massive hexagonal convex panel that looks like it's made out of the same type of wood veneer that you'd find on a 60s or 70s Globe drinks cabinet. To the point where I think there's probably there's a big panel to the left, and I think that's a drinks cabinet that's probably full of Baby Sham glasses and some Decaiper cherry brandy minis, and maybe a few barley wines with gold foil tops. Yeah. It's so beautiful and so unique. Fantastic. Probably another one of the reasons why the episode Spacefall cost most of the series budget is because of the design of all this stuff. Because on the other hand, Cygnus Alpha, is a bit rubbish. It's a bit crap. All this talk of this terrible penal colony, and it just really turns out to be a cheap load of old bab. They're obviously short of money at that point. So in Spacefall, you've got all these beautiful sets, the space model work. You've got a big cast of extras because there must be about 12 different people playing the ship's crew. You've got all the different prisoners, and then Cygnus Alpha, the penal colony, turns out to be a herky cult with maybe a dozen extras and a silly villain, which is basically good.
It's weird, isn't it? It's a weird part when you read it back.
Yeah,
and that's the one where the character's played by Brian Blessed.
That's right.
Yeah.
Blessed going full Blessed.
Yeah.
It's going absolute full Blessed, but it's cheap tat. And even in the novelisation, it reflects that because they've got no money, they've got to write the script to be a low-budget episode. So there's a bit of lack of logic, a bit of internal inconsistency, a lack of sense in the way that Blake Seven often does, just really thanks to using sci-fi trappings, but not putting any real effort into any level of verisimilitude. So because of the cheapness, the penal colony doesn't really make any sense. Why go to the expense of dropping criminals off on a planet where we hear there's like 500 people, even though we only see about a dozen, with nothing going on except a quarry and shit weather? It's not really cost effective or sensible. It's got no utility value. They're not being put to work on anything. No. They're not being made to produce anything in harsh conditions. They're just dropped off on this planet and left to fend for themselves. And after 2 episodes talking about Cygnus Alpha Penal Colony, that's a wee bit disappointing. Up until now, they've had all that effort with sets and costumes and model work. I guess ultimately you've got to do something on the cheap to balance the books. So a crappy temple or cave set from Doctor Who, a few robes and other gubbins as costumes, and boom, episode kitted out. Just give Brian Blessed a weird hairdo to suggest the future, and it's in the bag. The only 2 things that give you a hint that Brian Blessed is not just some 18th century cultist or monastery leader is that he's got a weird little stuck-on ponytail that looks like it's been stuck on with sellotape. And at the bottom of his robes is wearing like pure white rubber-soled sneakers, which you get a look at on a couple of occasions. Yeah, it's a bit shit. Extras in grey wool robes in a quarry, but nevertheless, still some absolutely great lines. Villa gets an absolute cracker. After they've wandered through a quarry, and they come across a matte painting of a spooky temple. Villa says, architectural style appears to be early maniac. It's absolutely amazing. It's so good. But there's a bit with Blessed where he's talking to his chief priestess or whatever. And it made me realise, it suddenly became clear to me how much of his shtick Matt Berry probably took from 1970s Brian Blessed.
Yeah.
Because there's a line where he refers to the newly arrived prisoners as a great bounty, but he says, a true bounty. I was like, hang on a minute. That's Matt Berry's been an entire career of mimicking lines like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
There's some other really, really, really fun bits as well. And in the novelisation, there are some jarring, lazy bits. Like at one point, it refers to Avon checking the Liberator's sonar display. And at one point towards the end, Zen says he's detected 3 Federation pursuit ships at the edge of the galaxy and they're turning our way. Fortunately, I think whoever was filming this, the script editor just went, that's fucking stupid. That's stupid. Change it. But there's so many great bits that Brian Blessed and his lot convince the new arrivals that the air is poisoned, so now they must take a drug or die. And the drug is did you see what the drug was?
Well, it's just chalk, isn't it?
It was a platter of what looked like Tree Bar extra strong mints.
Yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Because of course all the set dressing and everything is just stuff that they've nicked from castle sets.
Yeah.
It's just...
Yeah, it's very, very effective though. If you have those, if you got some sort of space sickness, have some tree bomb mints, you'll be fine.
This episode in the book is crap. On TV, Blessed elevates this episode purely on the force of his personality.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can absolutely believe he would be a nutty, power-hungry, religious zealot bent on spreading the good word unto the stars, and he uses the entirety of his range.
Yeah.
From one end, we've got the gentle scenery-chewing, weird vaudeville Shakespearean delivery at 95% blessed, all the way to booming head case projected to the back of the theatre, a 20,000-person theatre at 147% blessed.
Yeah.
It's fucking incredible, to the point where I think that Gareth Thomas must have felt intimidated by him, because I don't know if you noticed, but in that episode, Gareth Thomas dials his Blake performance right up to 11. He is so theatrical and over the top in his line delivery, and I think it's got to be acting opposite Blessed that made him get more heightened.
Yeah.
But there is good stuff in there. It's not just Blessed. The episode picks up in the back half with a big, well-staged scrap when the prisoners revolt. That's all great. There's stabbings. Villa stabbing someone in the back with a knife covered in blood. There's spears. And there's a real sense of peril as these prisoners that are left. And I must say, there's only half the number of prisoners that there were that probably survived the prison ship because they can't afford to pay for all the extras.
Yeah.
And most of the prisoners seem to consist of just stuntmen they've put in tabards to have this big fight. As they're desperately trying to get hold of the teleport bracelets that Blake has brought down, mostly failing and getting brutally murdered with spears. But we do get the core of the crew back up on the Liberator with Brian Blessed, who also got one of these bracelets, and he gives this incredible megalomaniac speech.
Yeah.
Before Blake beams him into space where he explodes.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, you don't need to see it to realise how wonderful that bit where he says, "I was their priest," Vargas crooned insanely, "but I will return to them." And then Jenna punches the control. "A god!" She shouts. So she becomes blessed in the end. Speaking for him, as he's obliterated into his mouth gaping as he uttered the final word.
Of course.
And as he disappeared into the void, his body disintegrating into billions of subatomic particles. So you've got billions of subatomic particles of Brian Blessed. The words seemed to echo after him in a long, mournful wail. Then he was gone, leaving only a silent emptiness.
So in the book, Jenna does for him.
Yeah.
Because in the TV show, and I bet it was Gareth Thomas who insisted on this, in the TV show, she doesn't speak. She just sits there looking terrified, and it's Blake who expels into the void. Oh, how disappointing. That should have been Jenna's moment. So, good on the novel for reflecting the script and having that be Jenna's moment, because I think it was a common thing with old shows like this where the star of the show would get things changed to their benefit.
Yeah.
That was half of the complaints of people like George Takei and James Doohan and people like that on Star Trek, was that things were written for them, and Shatner and Nimoy insisted that they were changed so they became theirs, so it ended up becoming less of an ensemble piece. I don't know how true this is, but I do seem to recall that the reason Gareth Thomas left Blake 7 is because he started wanting to have more and more power and influence, and he wanted to direct episodes, and the producers didn't agree, so he ended up falling out and leaving the show.
Yeah, because he said he didn't like science fantasy or something, and he wanted that but that's what he said, whether that's the truth or not.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's part of the control. I'll write these episodes, I'll direct them, and we'll steer them in my direction. So
Oh, that is a shame. That is a shame, because that is a good moment for Jenna that she loses.
Yeah, there is a good moment. Can I come to this bit here? It goes backwards and forwards on the Liberator, and there's a bit where she goes off and finds some outfits, and then she comes back in, and it says, Avon casually looks round and then sat up straight, his eyes popping out of his head. Oh. His first thought was to wonder how a beautiful and sexy star maiden had managed to get aboard the Liberator, and it took all of 10 seconds for him to realise that it was Jenna, attired in the most magnificent and rather revealing space-age costume. And where that comes from, I don't know. It's completely out of keeping with the rest of the novel. And I imagine that's just Trevor Hoyle looking at Jenna and thinking, whoa, I've got to write a bit in here. I presume that's there that Avon is taken aback, because most of the time he's sneering at her, but he sees this beautiful and sexy star maiden in front of him, and his jaw drops.
Yeah, at this point, Trevor Hoyle, I don't think, has seen the series. I think he's
he's just imagining it.
It's based on this purely on the script because
Yeah, because I just thought perhaps he was watching it and just writing everything down as he watched it. So, that's interesting to know.
But this is based on the script, so I think, and that's why Jenna is described as like raven-haired.
That's it. Yeah.
Black leather bound.
Yeah.
You know, so they were definitely going for like
it's not the Jenna we know, is it at all?
No, it was like sexy catsuit Raquel Welch, I think, in Terry Nation's mind.
Yeah.
Whereas in the show, she comes out in a rather attractive pair of purple suede pants with stack heel boots and a rather pleasant flowery blouse. Which, don't get me wrong, she looks great.
Yeah, it goes on this bit. Yeah, it says she stood in the doorway, well aware of the stunning effect and reveling in Avon's goggling admiration. Her expression one of impish seductiveness.
Yeah.
He says, "That looks," Avon swallowed, "incredible." He got slowly to his feet and gazed at her with real appreciation. "You think it does something for me?" Jenna inquired coyly, posing for him. Avon nodded dumbly. "It does something for me too," he confessed. Just real sleaze from Avon.
Yeah.
Uncharacteristic.
You don't get that in the telly version, do you?
Yeah. It's been a long time since I wore clothes like this. It makes me feel like a woman again. "Me too," says Avon. I've made that bit up.
Avon goes back, and of course, she talks about the treasure room, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Where she talks about there are more incredible riches that the galaxy I ever imagined could have existed in the galaxy or whatever. So in the TV version, he goes back. I was half expecting him to come back in one of his later series, you know, black and silver weird Robin Hood suits.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He comes back in exactly the same bland tabard. But he dumps on the table what looks like a half bucket load of really cheap costume jewelry. That looks really shitty. Oh dear. Part 4, or episode 4. Blake has decided he wants to go to Saurian Major because he's heard there are rebels there and that all Federation signals are coordinated from a facility there so they can strike a blow. Avon's not so keen, but Gan and Jenna are game for it, and on the way they encounter a small drifting craft, so they pick it up and it contains 3 cryo tubes that will become something of a complication when Gan and Jenna stay aboard and the others teleport down to Saurian Major. So there are 2 developments here. One is we end up meeting Callie, who is essentially, apart from Zen, the 7th member of the crew, and we'll get to Callie. But the other is a character development for Gan.
Yeah.
That I think destroys Gan as a character, and he never recovers from it.
Mm.
And actually, it's contradictory, because up until now, he's been this big, beefy guy. He's been involved in the scraps on the ship. He's been involved in scrapping with security guards. In the 3rd part, on Cygnus Alpha, he's involved in the fight with the cultists. And at one point, you actually see him going with a spear, as if he's spearing somebody off camera. But on this one, because I think they want to send Avon, Villa, and Blake down to the planet, and they're going to leave Jenna and Gan back aboard the ship with this little ship with the cryo tubes, they need to create some tension. And so far, they've established Gan as being this massive, brutally strong, decent fighter who really would become something of a plot problem whenever you need physical hand-to-hand combat. And I think it's a real shame that they introduce this element where Gan has a limiter that stops him killing.
Yeah.
And I think it's convenient, probably hastily added feature by Terry Nation to ensure that bit more peril when the assassins thaw out, despite the fact we appear to have seen him brutally beating up security guards and running through cultists with a spear. And it reminded me a lot of what they did with Worf in the early seasons of The Next Generation. He was always used as a way of showing how dangerous villains were when he would step in and they would just overcome him really easily. And it happened so often, he just ended up seeming fucking useless. And so as this character who's a Klingon warrior, all you ever saw him get was beat up. You end up with a similar situation with Gan, and it ends up happening so often that he can't do anything, or he gets a headache, or he gets captured, or any of these things, that it becomes pretty much useless.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he gets written out early in season 2. I don't know. But
it's sad when he goes, but he is no great loss, is he?
No, it's a shame, because I think as that big, softly spoken, tough guy, I think he was really good. Him ended up being a big, softly spoken, tough guy who, whenever things get slightly hairy, goes, "Oh, I've got a headache," and just breaks down and gets captured. you know, and that's the core of his character. That's a bit more disappointing, isn't
Yeah.
it? But other than that, there are some good things in this, and there's some great things in the novel as well. And one of which is the weapons that they get on the Liberator. Now, on TV, I think as a kid, I was always really excited that I could play Blake 7 just by nicking my mum's curling tongs.
Yeah.
And tucking the power cord into my belt and running around with curling tongs, because they're just little
Wearing a
curling tongs with
bangle.
lights
Wearing a
on.
bangle.
Yeah.
Teleport, but dead easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Just getting my mum's costume jewellery for a bangle, get her curling tongs and a tabard.
Yeah.
But in the book, they're fucking hardcore weapons.
Yeah,
these things. Because, okay, we'll cut to the chase. Avon, Villa, Blake go down to the planet's surface because they want to try and catch the attention of the rebels who hide out in the hills, and they end up meeting Callie. Again, it's in a different initial character description based upon the script rather than the ultimately cast actor. So quite different, but otherwise, dialogue-wise, pretty much exactly as it is in the TV show. But these cryo-sleep dudes on this small craft, one of whom is already dead because his cryo tube has kind of bust and he's aged and died, sort of the Woman in Planet of the Apes style.
Yeah.
And the others thaw out and become a problem. None of them get any dialogue. One of them attacks Jenna by amusingly just throwing a spanner at her arm. which just seems a little bit odd.
It's a space spanner.
Anyway. A space spanner, yeah. But she takes one of them down with one of these weapons that they've got. And I think it's the first time they've used one of these weapons in anger, because on Cygnus Alpha, Blake never got to fire one off, I don't think, apart from hitting a statue. But it says, Jenna fired. A ragged blue light leapt from the muzzle, and the fierce impact of the discharge sent him hurtling back against the bulkhead, half of his face gone and his chest in ruins. He slid down in a bloody heap, the life snuffed out of him like a dead candle flame. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, super.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
I think there's another one where the weapon punches a fist-sized hole in the other one. Oh,
yeah, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
But again, Jenna collapses against him, sobbing with relief when she does that.
Yes,
one of them attacked me. So, yeah.
She does.
There's a recurring theme there towards the end, but really, really good stuff.
Yeah. The cryopod angle's quite good as well.
Yeah.
I think these days, cryo sleep tubes are old hat, because we've all seen the Alien movies, the Alien franchise.
Yeah.
But for 1977, I think that's still a pretty cool concept. I mean, you had it in Space Seed in the original Khan episode in the original series, but that wasn't sort of handled quite as scientifically, I don't think. The cryo tubes look pretty cool. I think you get Avon's description of why they would use cryo tubes, which I think is really good. It all feels really good. I think I don't know what Terry Nation must have watched or read when he wrote that script, but that's pretty cool. I really like that.
Yeah, that dialogue with Avon is really good, where he explains stuff. And it does make good logical sense.
Yeah, and it shows Avon's a thinker as well.
Yeah, that comes across really strongly, doesn't it?
Yeah, because he judges probably the purpose of this ship and why, just because they've got cryotubes. He naturally understands the purpose of it, and he explains it. Rather than modern sci-fi, where they just go in with a scanner, go woo 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 woo, and then read the scanner. You get the sense that Avon is really smart and he understands this stuff, and that's really, really cool.
Yeah,
there's a really great episode in Space 1999 where they come across a planetoid, like an asteroid or something, and they find a steel door on it, and they manage to break through to it and find a guy that's been cryogenically frozen in there for what could be hundreds or thousands of years. Turns out it's Peter Bowles. It's Peter Bowles without a moustache, wearing stack heels. And,
you would try and keep him alive, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, they do. But he turns out to be an absolute raving, murdering serial killer psychopath who was sealed in that asteroid by
just
his
like
people.
He was in To the Man of Ball.
To the man, because of his terrible crimes, they sealed him in an asteroid and sent him spinning off into space.
Yeah,
and it's really brilliant because it's got all his art aboard, because he was also a painter, and all the paintings are fucking terrifying. It's great. It's such a good episode of Space 1999.
I must watch that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I'll figure out which one it is and let you know.
Yeah.
In fact, I might actually go and dig out my Space 1999 box set after this and watch it, because it's great. It's really,
I bought
really
it on Amazon Prime, one of the I don't know how many series there are, but I will get around to watching that. at some
There are
point.
2 seasons. Season 2
Just
is
the that's what I thought. Yeah.
yeah. Season 2 is a bit bad, but season 1 is almost all uniformly brilliant.
Yeah.
Love season 1. Yeah, season
Yeah.
2 bit crap. Season 2 they got rid of the showrunners. Jerry Anderson's Sylvia Anderson, her influence on the series waned because I can't remember whether they got divorced at that time, but she always had like a massive influence on the first season. Jerry Anderson took a back seat. They brought in an American producer called Fred Freeberger, who was the guy who was put in charge of Star Trek, the original series, for Series 3, and was responsible for some of the worst, commissioning some of the worst episodes of the original series, episodes like Spock's Brain. And he took over season 2. That they'd already, because there was a massive delay in getting renewed for season 2, they'd got rid of a lot of the sets. So the sets were cheaper and smaller, so you didn't get that grand, big main mission set. They got rid of loads of the cast with no explanation. They just weren't there anymore. So people like Paul and Kano and Victor Bergman, the professor, were all just vanished, all just gone with no explanation. And they brought in Tony Anholt to play a character called Tony. And it has occasional bright spots, season 2, but season 1 is uniformly a good season and is really deep and philosophical at parts, and quite, sometimes quite slow paced, but other times really action packed. They also changed the opening title music for season 2, which was a massive mistake, because that opening titles for season 1, chef's kiss. Incredible music, incredible, visuals, just fantastic. I love season 1. Can't get enough of it. But anyway, back to Blake 7. Now, my memories of this episode are flawed, because I could have sworn that one of the cryosleep assassins was Roy from EastEnders. Yeah, who in our weird EastEnders people who try and marry Pat Butcher, sequence, of course, Roy ended up marrying Pat Butcher. But it turns out I was getting mixed up with another one. He's the villain in episode 12. So yes, 2 different Pat Butcher suitors have been villains in Blake 7.
There have been lots of them, so yeah.
But he's not in this one. It's not in this one. But again, novelisation, it does what it needs to do. It's all right. I do like the bit with the use of the weapon blowing a guy basically in half. That's really cool. But yeah, it's all right. And then of course we'll meet Callie. She comes on board, I think, more due to circumstances rather than anything else. She's there. She's psychic, which is an interesting character trait. She can communicate with them psychically because she's from Auron, but they can't communicate with her. So they can hear her thoughts if she chooses them to, but she can't be communicated with psychically otherwise. I think that was an interesting character take that they tried to develop over time, like her loneliness and her lack of contact with her own race. They did bring our race in, and actually the end of season 2, I think, when we get the intergalactic war. No, end of season 3. End of season 2 is the intergalactic war, which all seems to develop in the space of one episode and come completely out of the blue when invaders from the Andromeda galaxy turn up and the Liberator ends up getting involved and the Federation fleet gets involved and everything goes terribly wrong. And at the beginning of season 3, Blake's gone, Jenna's gone, and they're all off the Liberator on a planet's surface because they've had to evacuate. The end of season 3 is when Callie's people get involved, and Callie doesn't survive that encounter at the end of season 3. So I think they did interesting things with Callie, but sporadically, and really not that entirely satisfactorily. And whereas Jenna was the one who ended up sitting at the teleporter, teleporting people up and down, in season 3, that largely becomes Callie's role to teleport people up and down, because Dana comes in, who's all action, and she gets to go on the teleporter and have fights, whereas Callie, again, another slightly wasted female character, but with a really interesting setup, which is kind of a shame. Kind of a shame. But there we go, and it ends, and Blake has got his 7. So they've escaped narrowly from Cygnus Alpha, and he's brought Gan and Villa with him, and now they've escaped from Saurian Major, and they've got Callie. So at the end, Blake said, "We have our 7. We have our crew." And Zen is technically one of the 7. So the novel kind of ends slightly anticlimactically. Other than that moment where it says, "Right, okay, we're Blake 7 now. Hooray!" Yeah. But otherwise, I think a good novelisation of 4 relatively strong episodes.
Yeah, it is. Stronger in the first half, as we've said before.
Yeah.
But reading it back, I thought there's still good stuff in the later chapters as well. And once you know where it's going, you think this is all part of the setup, and you've just got to live with that.
Yeah.
You don't come to the end of the first book of Lord of the Rings and think, well, what a load of rubbish that was. You might do, but it is leading somewhere else.
Very true. Yeah, so thoroughly enjoyable. And again, it's the first time I've watched any of these episodes since I did the original DVD box set binges.
Yeah.
Probably 15 years ago. I think the danger of doing this is now I'm probably going to have to binge them all over again.
Yeah, I think so. We'll go back and watch the first series again and then see where that takes me. But those episodes are as good science fiction as you could ever wish to see, certainly from that era. Wonderful and dark, well acted, really strong characters, tremendous stuff. And that's captured in the book.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think, probably with the exception of when we got to things like maybe The Expanse, which, okay, doesn't have the same galactic scale.
Yeah.
It's a more modest scale. But I don't think we've had a really quite as hard-edged sci-fi space opera type TV show as this. I know there have been some oddball TV shows out there. I watched a YouTube video with somebody talking about Lex not so long ago, and that sounded fucking weird and quite baffling concept to some degree. But I don't think we've ever had anything quite like this since or before, for that matter.
No,
and that's a real shame because it's uniquely British.
Yeah,
it's like someone thought it's all right doing all this Doctor Who stuff, but let's do something for the grown-ups. I don't think it managed to maintain that, though. I think they did start to tone down some of the hard-edged stuff.
When I watched it a few years ago, I remember really enjoying the first, and then I'd watch them on a Sunday morning. I'd just get up and watch an episode. And I did feel like I was just churning through. It didn't seem to be going anywhere, which is maybe what I felt as a kid when I first watched it. I just thought this would just be episode after episode after episode, not realizing what a great conclusion it would reach.
Yeah, and I think that was really demonstrated in the Callie story arc we just referred to, where they decided to do something with her and the fate of the Aurons, and they just really hot shot it into one episode, and then she's gone.
Yeah,
there's the idea of bringing Blake back on a couple of occasions. It's just all done so hastily. Had that final episode, Blake, been the culmination of a series of mini arc or points where there are hints of what's going on, I think it would have been a lot more. It's a great, powerful series finale as it is, just because of the rawness of the final scene. But it could have been so much better had they actually injected some more thought into the overall arc, rather than just let's get these scripts done, bang, 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 episodic.
Yeah.
But
and let's say you look at Servalan and Travis coming back into it, and quite often I'd watch it and think, what are they doing again? Why are they here? Why are they following them? And I've already lost track of the storyline at that point. Yeah. And these were great characters coming into it, but I didn't really know why they were there and what the purpose was.
Yeah, it'd be interesting watching it all again, because in my memory, when the Liberator breaks up at the end of season 3, Servalan's on board, and there's a shot of the deck of the Liberator breaking and tilting up at an angle, and Servalan sliding down it into oblivion. But she's soon back again in season 4.
Yeah.
So it's like that they made really grand efforts to do something epic and to move things on, but continually ended up going back to the well again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what? It'll be interesting watching it all over again and seeing where it goes. Because I mean, I have watched them all, but can I remember more than half a dozen episodes? No, I don't think I can.
Yeah.
I don't think I can. Weirdly, as a kid, I would have sworn that there was an episode where there was some kind of connection to the universe of the stainless steel rat, Slippery Jim DeGriz. But I think I must have dreamt it or made it up. Because when I rewatched the series on DVD, I was waiting for that episode, and it never came.
Yeah.
It never came.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, at least we've got Servalan to look forward to.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts on Blake 7, the novelisation by Trevor Hoyle?
Yeah, I was just interested. Have you read any of the other novels? I did look at those later adaptations, and I could see, are there other ones with Trevor Hoyle? I thought, seeing as I've read this one and enjoyed it, I might carry on.
Yeah, so
It's
Trevor
not the
Hoyle
sort
did.
of thing I usually read, but I've
Yeah,
enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed reading it again. So I think, why not? They're easy to read. It's
yeah,
180 pages.
yeah. Hoyle did two more.
Yeah,
He novelised the next four
yeah.
episodes, and then he did a fix-up novel of 4 episodes from season 4.
All right, great. Yeah,
So he didn't continue and novelise even the entirety of season 1. But Big Finish have done a box set of hardcovers where each hardcover novelises 2 episodes at a turn.
I'd seen that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and each one's done by a different author.
Mm.
And I did look them up on eBay, and I thought, no, I don't want to pay 140 quid for this box set of novels that I might not ever read. I am more interested, though, in seeing if I can get the Trevor Hoyle ones for a reasonable price.
Yeah,
I mean, interesting, the Big Finish ones will be written on a couple of levels. They'll be different because, number one, they'll be based upon the broadcast episodes rather than the scripts. And number two, there have been numerous Big Finish expansions to the Blake Seven universe in terms of audio books and the Paul Darrow written Blake spin offs, one of which I think is a prequel, which is about, sorry, not Blake spin off, one of which is a prequel about Avon as a younger man,
yeah,
and one of which is a sequel to the episode Blake, which explains how Avon got out of that situation and didn't die at the end
yeah,
of Blake. So, yeah, I mean, it might be interesting to read them because they're written by Paul Darrow. I mean,
yeah.
I can't remember whether Paul Darrow's still alive, but I know he had significant
No,
health problems.
he died. Might have been 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. I
I
think he had
remember.
significant
I
health
saw
problems
him.
because of diabetes, didn't he?
Yeah, he'd lost his legs. I remember seeing him,
Yeah.
and I thought, "Oh, this Paul Darrow. There's
Yeah.
Avon," and
Yeah.
he was in a wheelchair, and he was very sad, but he was still a voiceover artist.
Yeah.
He used to work on a radio station called, I think it was Union Jack or something,
Right.
and he did all the links, and they were really funny. And I listened to, they did a tribute show to him when he died, but I think I downloaded that about 4 years ago, I think. So sadly,
Yeah.
he's no longer around.
Do you know he did a pilot for a series called Rough Magic, which was very, very loosely based on the Call of Cthulhu, starring
Right.
Paul Darrow. Yeah,
Wow.
starring Paul Darrow.
Yeah.
So it was like I think it was set on the Falkland Islands, and it was like a super cheap, low budget Lovecraftian investigation of island cultists, and Paul Darrow was the investigator. Or was he the villain? I can't remember. I saw it on VHS years ago, and it was a really shoddy copy. I think you can get it now. I think it was the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society who put out lots of different merchandise, did a series of DVDs called the H.P. Lovecraft Collection, and they managed to get hold of Rough Magic and put it on one of them. Budget wise, it looked like sub Sci-Fi Channel level budget.
Yeah.
Did you ever come across any of those Doctor Who spin-off movies that featured actors from Doctor Who
No.
in things that were sort of Doctor Who but with the serial numbers filed off?
No, I
So there
never
was
saw
one
those.
called, I think there was one called The Stranger, which had Colin Baker in it,
Oh, yeah.
and there was one about there was one story about Silurians, which I think actually might have had the character Liz Shaw in it, played by the original actor who played Liz Shaw in the John Pertwee stories. It was that kind of level of production value, i.e., not a lot of production value, and I think a lot of the people who did those were doing it for love of the property and just wanting to actually work. One of the most hard to get for years and years and years, and I remember seeing it at I think it was a video fair at Hull City Hall in probably the 90s, was a unit spin-off film about Sergeant Benton. And there was a VHS of it, and the cover, it looked like, have you ever seen those like Lewis Collins knockoff Italian mercenary films like Codename Wild Geese?
Yeah.
And the Commander and Panzer and
Yeah.
Codename Wild Geese, the Commander, and Panzer Leopard or something like that. And the covers were amazing, like fully painted cover artwork. Well, this unit video with Benton on the cover, I think was it called Warhead or something? Looked absolutely incredible, action packed. Benton in his in his military fatigues with an SLR. Oh, it looked so exciting, and that ended up coming out on DVD a few years ago, along with a couple of other loosely connected things that Sergeant Benton, of the actor John Deteen, I think. No, not John Deteen. He was in John Deteen was Day of the Triffids guy, wasn't it?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, whatever Sergeant Benton's real name is.
Hmm.
And it was so disappointing. I mean, it was interesting, but it was more really about Sergeant Benton having PTSD or something.
Yeah.
But there was one really interesting thing. It was like a little documentary about the guy who played Sergeant Benton and his time as a crooner, like performing as a singer. And there's this bit where he's performing. I think it's like a railway museum or something. And there's him and his lady friend playing like a Bon Tempi keyboard, and he's there doing his crooning as people with prams are walking past looking confused. Oh God, yeah. But it's out there and it's available. Yeah. I think I might have sent Fairthy and Yaki copies of it when it came out. Just like, you got to say this. Oh yeah. Anyway, that was a long digression from talking about Rough Magic with Paul Darrow, which now I really feel like I've got to find.
Yeah.
Well, John, that was Blake 7 by Trevor Hoyle.
Yeah.
So, thank you for popping by Derry and Tom's to sup a couple of liveners on a Saturday afternoon and talk about Blake 7. And you'll have to come back and we'll talk about something else at some point.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Cheers, dude. And I must say, the cherry marshmallow gin liqueur mixed with Fanta mystery purple pop is fucking great.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. Yeah. So, here's to you. I'll see you in Rochdale.
Yes, look forward to it.
Massive thanks to John for venturing to Derry and Tom's and the world of podcasting for the first time. That was the last of our dancing round the world of IP-related fiction that isn't Moorcock, and next time we dive into that realm, it will be with Mike's Doctor Who novel, The Coming of the Terraphiles. So, watch out for that. And thanks as always to our patrons for keeping the show on the road. First those without Tier, Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster and Sebastian Weetabix, and our Chaos Engineers, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Nelbert, Ofer Ziv, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Scott Butler and Simon Perrins. And of course thanks to our crafty Jugaderos, Alexander Harris, Christian Hundal, Ilian Weston Ra, Liam Turner, Loz, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Graham Holden and Toby White. And eternal thanks to our patron demons Alistair Davison, Andy Clark, Andy Darby, David Lee, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Imria, Jenny Stem, Jason Vogel, Jay Reeser, Joe Monty, Lee Gary, Mark Hebden, Marius Latauskas, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tony Malazzo, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last but never least, Robert McMillan. Enough from me. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @BreakfastRuins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. We have our Patreon page too, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But for now, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.